Welcome to a new episode of TTG Conversations 5 Questions video series. This episode will focus on how travelers are returning to air travel in safe and new ways. Taking us through this topic is Chetan Kapoor, co-founder and chief strategy officer of Safe Travel Barometer. Now, Chetan has worked with top travel brands on industry insights, analysis and trends, and his foresight into travel industry's COVID response has resulted in him co-founding Safe Travel Barometer in early 2020. Welcome, Chetan, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for hosting me, Karen. Appreciate it.
I've got 5 questions for you, and here's the first. The Safe Travel Barometer has been tracking COVID-19 health and safety protocols implemented by travel suppliers throughout the pandemic, and it has a monthly leaderboard for airlines across the world. How well are the airlines doing in this regard?
I think they're doing better on a daily basis. When it all started a year ago, it was really a hot mess, and it still is a hot mess, but not as much. It ranges from utter confusion to at least now having some sense of knowledge of what is expected when you're traveling. Airlines in this context are striving for partnerships with with healthcare divisions, with the government divisions, with immigration divisions, and a whole lot others, right? So they are doing better every passing day. But the challenges that we see as an observer is that the expectations of traveling today is so different from what travelers were used to prior to the pandemic and the lockdown. And that communication in a whole lot of aspects is still missing. The industry still talks about only the COVID safety mechanisms, which is really great, but there's so many other spectrums of travel that have changed alongside it. And even in our own growth of the initiatives that we've tracked, we've evolved from just tracking the COVID health and safety to also looking at initiatives which are pertaining to traveler flexibility, cancellation, service excellence, because all of these initiatives really ultimately contribute to the traveler experience as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, we have learned that the COVID-19 fight has to evolve, with new knowledge acquired about the virus. Has every new milestone in understanding the virus, such as the way it is transmitted and the conditions that it favors, etc., led to a change in the way airlines approach health and safety protocols?
Yeah, absolutely. You see them reflected in the form of the communication when they talk about HEPA air filters. You see them in the form of communicating how frequently they disinfect or the tools they use to disinfect their surfaces. You see them in just removing anything to do with contracts, right? Magazines are off the racks, things like that. So absolutely. And I think travel industry led by airlines and I would also put hotels in the mix. They continue to listen to what's going on in the scientific community and try to implement it within their processes so that they are at least the front runners and the flag bearers when it comes to communication with the travelers, saying, hey, this environment is safe based on the new studies that we've done, and we've done X, Y, Z to ensure that you're safeguarded based on the new knowledge that we have now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what elements of airline health and safety protocols will likely remain even after the pandemic is eradicated?
I think, so just to take a step back, the Safe Travel Barometer really tracks 10 industry categories. So we've got a cross-spectrum knowledge of what's going on across those 10 segments. The core segments that we truly focus on is airlines and airports. So when you ask about what would continue going forward is the continued transition to digital means. So if anything, this pandemic has accelerated the shift of digital adoption. We've all experienced at airports, especially the kiosks sometimes work, don't work. They've got limited support, but we've seen really that accelerate dramatically on one hand. In some airports, we even have sensor-based kiosks, so you don't really need to touch it, right? That's one element which I think will accelerate and continue. The other element, at least from a safety and hygiene perspective, is, and funny, we've often seen this even before pandemic in various Southeast Asian countries. People did tend to wear face masks in general, especially after after last SARS broke out, right? So we may see those elements continue. You will have travelers who would still feel a little bit anxious. So they'll be like, don't worry, even if the airline doesn't provide the mask anymore, we'll just carry it because we're in a tight space until the world turns around and it's completely vaccinated, which is going to be years in the making. So I
Yeah,
think these
that's
two elements, continued digital push and travelers taking certain degree of ownership rather than relying on suppliers or hospitality providers to offer them these things, travelers would be the ones carrying it going forward as well.
And I think it's important that travelers ourselves must be responsible to make that happen.
Absolutely. And we're talking about ethical travel, we're talking about
Oh
responsible
yeah.
travel, we're talking about travelers maintaining quarantine and distancing, and the world is in a flux right now. So not everywhere and everybody follows it down to the T,
Yeah.
but more and more ownership coming from the travelers from within them. You'll see a whole lot of these things streamline in a few months to a year from now.
Right. Okay. We can't have a conversation about COVID-19 health and safety protocols without discussing health passports.
Yeah.
So how are the airlines that you're tracking approaching the adoption of health passports, and what are the roadblocks to a speedy and synchronized implementation?
I think you're absolutely right. No conversation is complete without it, and we all know how at least IATA is piloting travel passes around the world, and we've really seen them push it in many markets with their pilot airlines. Alternatively, we're also seeing B2C providers who are come out there with their health pass or travel pass solutions. Um, the way we look at it is, now having operated for a year in the intersection of travel and health, we see that the concept or the conversation of health passport is a step in the right direction, but also it is not everything, because there is going to be trial and tribulations. We are definitely seeing that countries have their unique standards. No countries are speaking along similar lines when it comes to standards and frameworks. IATA Travel Pass hopefully brings in a certain framework, but then it will still be down to different governments, different stakeholders to interpret as well as adopt to the things that it works. Because what's happening today is the expectation that everything is digital, everything is connected, but the reality is it's far from it. You're still having travelers travel with a paper test report because whichever healthcare provider doesn't offer a digital health report. Uh, and if these applications are built on the fundamental premise of things being digital and things being easily integrated with the healthcare providers, it is still miles away from being real, right? So it's a step in the right direction, but there are a lot of hoops to jump over.
That's right. Okay. Are there loopholes in COVID-19 testings and quarantine procedures that can weaken travel suppliers and immigration agencies' attempt to limit COVID-19 spread? What can be done?
It'll be a little tricky over here because the simple answer is information should pass along all the stakeholders, right? But we all know the way industry functions, and we also know how privacy policies are. So that's going to be a real challenge, because if you as a traveler is traveling from point A to B via another destination, it's only those destinations who potentially know where you're coming in and out of. Nobody knows your previous travel history. Very few countries have it together to also then follow up on the traveler once they're at the destination, right? Singapore originally spoke about having an RFID tax, almost like your house arrest, right? Australia, New Zealand were amongst the first country to do hotel quarantine so that they could really check on travelers. But there are so many other countries who are unable to do that. UK is starting to get their act together now. And we're still seeing travelers are dodging these protocols by flying via destinations which now don't require quarantine. So it is here to stay. It's the ugly truth, because travelers are over smart. There is a lot of information out there for them to realize and educate themselves. The only way out through this is to transmit information to the stakeholders where required. But the way the industry frameworks are, they haven't come to speed with today's reality. Uh, we are still kind of transitioning from knowing what immigration authorities used to do and did well over the last 50, 100 years. But just this 1 year and the changes that come in, those regulations, those solutions need to be injected in the systems of these screeners so that they are well aware and they can document the traveler and they can then follow up with the traveler. I think one more point that I would like to add to this is we're seeing some really positive initiatives coming out of the Caribbean, as well as South Asia and in destinations like Maldives and Thailand, for example, right? They are really adopting the testing and tracing and testing mechanism. Travelers need to get tested before they come in. Travelers are advised only to be confined within their islands or within their resorts until the further tests have come in, and then they're slowly opening up. I think some of the Caribbean islands especially are doing a fantastic job, and they should be regarded as a case study on how communities can open up to tourism once again.
Okay, great. It's such a pleasure talking with you, Chetan. Thank you so much for giving us your time.
Likewise, Karen. I appreciate you having me over. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, great. So we'll catch up again in person soon, I hope.
Absolutely. Hopefully, I don't have to quarantine longer than expected.
That's right. We all hope for that.
Yeah.
And to everybody, take care and stay safe. We'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye.